Meeting will come to order. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to our first budget work session for the fiscal 27 budget, June 3rd, 2026. And from that, I will turn it over to County Manager.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners, and citizens. Thank you for attending today's budget work session. On May 27th, I presented my recommended FY27 budget to the board. Today's work session is intended to provide a deeper review of the budget and answer questions raised by the board and discuss the strategies used to balance the budget. This budget was developed during a very challenging financial period for Caswell County. We began the process facing a gap of approximately $3.8 million. Through extensive review of revenues, expenditures, staffing vacancy trends, debt service, and departmental operations, we have developed a balanced budget recommendation that does not rely on fund balance for recurring operations. During today's presentation, we'll review revenues, the major budget, balancing strategies, departmental expenditures, other county funds, and any remaining questions from the board. The purpose of this session is to provide transparency into how the recommendation was developed and allow the board the opportunity to provide direction as we move toward the budget adoption on June 15th. Next slide. Our presentation outline today will cover revenue overview, budget balancing strategies, department expenditures, other funds, and commissioner questions. Next slide.
With this slide, I want to give a quick high-level overview of our general fund and its transfers. Our general fund is actually several funds that we combine for reporting purposes. Because of this, we remove the transfers between the funds to avoid double counting our revenue. The net general fund total is $33,058,000. One note for the record, in preparing these materials, we found that Fund 120 had been left out, and we have corrected the numbers and included it.
At $33.1 million, the recommended general fund budget is $3.8 million less than the FY26 budget. It maintains the current property tax rate of 62.7 cents per $100 of assessed value and does not use fund balance to support recurring operations. Eliminating the use of fund balance is an important transition in the county's financial posture. Balancing this budget without fund balance requires difficult reductions, deferrals, and trade-offs that cannot become the county's long-term financial strategy. Before we begin discussing specific numbers, I want to revisit the 5 goals that shaped every recommendation contained within this budget. First, protect fund balance by eliminating its use as a recurring revenue source. Second, maintain core mandated services. Third, align recurring expenditures with recurring revenues. Fourth, reduce departmental operating expenditures using actual historical spending. And finally, maintain the current property tax rate of 62.7 cents. Every recommendation you'll see today ties back to one or more of these goals. Revenues, the starting point. Next slide. Revenue projections are the foundation of the budget. The FY27 general fund budget totals approximately $33.1 million. Property taxes remain our largest revenue source, followed by sales tax and services and intergovernmental revenues.
So this FY27 general fund revenue slide is our full revenue picture. And the reason why you see a gray column on the slide, or the extra gray column, is because there were some corrections. Several categories had been coded to character codes within our MUNIS system that was less reflective of what the actual figures reflected. The largest being revenue that was sitting in permits and fees, but were actually intergovernmental revenue, or NC, ACC, Consultant Jonna Sharp found these during one of her reviews and moved them to better aligned categories. The total did not significantly change. The money just landed in more appropriate places. So the headline is really at the bottom. Appropriated fund balance drops from $4.2 million to about $24,000 because we are no longer using basically our savings to pay for day-to-day operations. And probably the most important takeaway from this slide is the very last line. Our recurring revenues excluded fund balance are actually up about 361,000. So the budget is smaller, but it stands on its own. Next slide, please. So this side just indicates our tax base is relatively flat year over year, up about $5 million in total valuations. Real property and motor vehicles grew slightly, while personal property and public service companies dipped. We are recommending the rate stay at 62.7 cents. And at that flat rate, total property tax revenue is up about 110,000. The one number worth remembering is at the bottom, and that's a single penny on revenue generates about $242,000 in reoccurring revenue. So this chart shows our property tax rate. This chart shows how our property tax rate has moved over the past several years. The key context is the reevaluation, which took effect January 2025 and was first used in the FY or fiscal year 25 budget. Because property value went up significantly in the reevaluation, the board adopted a revenue neutral rate at 58.5 cents, down from 73.5. So the county would collect about the same revenue levels as before the reevaluation. For FY27, again, we're recommending that the rate stay at 62.7 cents, no tax increase. Sales and tax required set-asides. So sales tax totals about 7.67 million, but not all of that is ours to spend. Because we distribute sales tax on an ad valorem basis, a portion of the fire district seen at bullet point number 1, and the state requires that a share of 2 of the articles be set aside for school capital and school debt, which is seen at bullet point number 2. After those required set asides, about 6.08 million is available for general funds. Intergovernmental revenues. Intergovernmental revenues come in 2 forms, and the slide separates them out. Restricted revenue can only be spent on specific programs, and unrestricted revenue we can use for things like general operations. Overall, the category is essentially flat, down $6,000, but there is real movement underneath. On the restricted side, DSS revenue is down because we budgeted for fewer positions, and that drop is matched by lower DSS spending. Public health is up because of new programs, and the school resource line is down $50,000 because of the anticipated Oakwood Elementary School closure. On the unrestricted side, the notable change is the indirect cost line, 113,000, which is a reimbursement from CAPS and solid waste funds for the county central services that they utilize for their enterprise. The county has always really been entitled to those funds. The audits confirmed it, but it had never really been budgeted before. So that's why you're seeing it here today.
Mr. Chairman, We're gonna go through all this before we ask questions, or can we stop at the point that we see something we want to ask?
Like you can ask when it comes up.
Okay. Keith, explain this indirect cost for cats and solid waste. And the reason I'm asking is because I went back to last year's budget and the budget before, and I didn't see anything on it. What is that? What does that entail?
So, the indirect cost, the concept is basically we're trying to allocate a portion of expense to the enterprise operations to cover what the county via central services services that they use. I don't know if that's best explanation. It's they're using the county for certain functions, central service functions, and we're just recouping some of those expenses.
From my understanding, it's like for the use of our county manager, your finance services, I guess some of your HR services that the county is already paying for, but I guess it's our portion that's kicking in to help pay for that.
All right. Help me try to understand this. Only the two enterprise pay this, correct?
Correct.
Well, I guess we're looking at doing it. You were with cats for a number of years. What, I guess, services would you utilize at cats from the county that would justify $53,000?
I know that Ms. Sharp and I discussed this yesterday, and we had said that it probably would be worthwhile to go back and look at the cost allocation plan, see what the rates are for the different services. But I do know at CATS, we do a lot of our stuff in-house ourselves. I do know that we use the county attorney at least once a year for the certs and assurances. Unless we have a HR issue or something, we pretty much do all of our own drug testing, background checks, and different things in-house. So we did discuss that yesterday, that we thought it would be worthwhile going back and look at the cost allocation plan.
Right. And I'm not trying to jump ahead, but I guess since we're on it, $61,000 of that was solid waste fee, correct?
Correct.
Indirect fee. How much is that going to contribute to this solid waste fee increase? How much of that indirect cost is going to be associated with the solid waste fee that we're having to increase?
I personally do not have a conversion for you right now.
I know that it would factor in, for their overall expenditures.
If I might.
Yes, sure.
The indirect cost was put in after the director had established the fees. So he was able to move dollars around from other categories to cover that indirect cost. And let me just mention the things that it covers. One of the big things that there's an indirect cost plan that you're required to do because of Department of Social Services. Because that helps validate some of the funding formulas that the state determines how dollars flow down to you. But it's also used, it is typical for enterprise funds to pay an indirect cost amount that covers the county manager, county attorney, finance, your HR systems, your IT systems. So Munis would be allocated. If they're not paying any building maintenance cost directly, if those are being paid out of the general fund, that would be allocated. So there is a pretty extensive formula and detail behind how these numbers were derived. And as part of the audit, they're required to record this. So it's going to be in an expense at the audit, whether you budget it or not.
Right. Well, it sounds like to me you're taking money from one pocket, putting it into another pocket.
Absolutely.
Within the county.
Because the general
Right.
fund is providing internal services to all of the other funds, but because solid waste and CATS operate as an enterprise fund, where they have their own sources of revenues, it's typical to allocate those dollars. It's, if the county chooses, to not allocate those dollars, we would have to go and talk with the auditors and see if that's going to cause any exception, in that we won't record those.
Right.
But if you don't record that, that will be a loss of $100,000 of revenue to the general fund that will have to go cut expenses in other areas.
Right, but I guess what you're doing when you say that it's a loss, basically those two departments are picking up that loss.
Yes,
Okay.
a portion of it, yes.
I went back and looked at all this stuff. I can't see where there was any findings the last 2 years concerning that indirect.
That's
cost.
because we recorded it. Even though it wasn't budgeted, it was recorded.
Well, I mean, I do know for the last 4 years that I've been on this board, CATS has never, ever come back to us for a dime of money. And I guess I'm looking at it as we're starting them off with a $53,000 deficit or saying that they've got to come up with this money when they've never came to us in 4 years and asked us for a dime.
But it has been recorded in CATS as part of the audits as well as solid waste.
And the other thing I'm worried about is that $61,000 being levied from solid waste, or this indirect cost being put on solid waste. How much is that costing for this increase in these solid waste fees?
It was not factored into the solid waste fees. The fees were already determined before we added this to AJ's budget.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm just gonna make a note. I'd like to go back and revisit this later.
Let's move on through this. Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Next slide, please. Another revenue source is permits and fees. Permits and fees are up about $128,000. The main reason for the changes is that a number of these fees had not been adjusted in recent budgets, because the delayed audit left us without reliable actual results to base these budgets on. With the audit work, these lines were rebuilt from actual collections and historical averages. So they now better reflect what we're truly bringing in, rather than old estimates. You'll see lines, for example, you'll see lines like register of deeds, excise tax, jail commissary, concealed weapons, all moved up to match the reality. Next slide. Sales and services is down about 75,000, and that's almost all due to EMS building. So what happened here? We built the FY26 budget. We used preliminary fiscal year 25 numbers, and in preparing the FY25 audit, it was discovered that more than $100,000 of public health revenue had been recorded as EMS revenue. So that this error overstated what we thought EMS was collecting in revenue. So correcting this, so the correction, it brought the EMS billing budget down to a realistic $1.24 million. And the folks, this was a cleanup item, so not an actual loss in revenue. Slide.
Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
why are the Co-Square rental fees down $9,500 from 10,000 to 500?
I'm sorry, Commissioner. I didn't-
Co-Square rental fees were 10,000 last year. This year, the 500.
Because we are not doing rental fees of $9,500.
Okay.
That's why we reduced it to make it more
Over.
realistic. Yeah,
Quite a bit less.
it was overstated.
I got you.
That was the first year that we were doing them, so we had no idea how much revenue it may generate.
So I know you all have seen this slide several times before, but one quick technical point that matters regarding our reserves. When we appropriate fund balance for the next year, the accounting rules require it to be classified as assigned. Because we are not appropriating fund balance in FY '27, that assigned amount moves into unassigned, which is the reserve that the state and our auditors pay close attention to or watch closely. So this budget strengthens the unassigned balance, which is one of our major goals.
Let me stop you right there, Keith.
All right.
Make sure I understand. This 3.7 million that's shown as unassigned, that's in the 26 budget. Am I thinking about this correctly? And when we roll into the 27 budget on July 1, that unassigned number will increase significantly. Am I thinking about this correctly?
Well, in concept, but these specific numbers are,
I'm not saying the numbers be exact, but
yeah,
they will.
in concept, you are correct. That assigned, if we don't budget any assigned dollars, that goes into unassigned.
So this 3.7 million was what we budgeted out of fund balance for this fiscal year,
For
approximately.
Well, for fiscal year 25.
Okay, okay. I'm looking at my dates wrong.
But
Yeah, I was
Going
thinking
by-
that was 26.
maybe it is 20, maybe it is 26. I'm looking at the fund balance estimate, being 6/30/25.
Ms. Sharp, could you elaborate on that?
Yes, you're right. That is the fund balance that was appropriated in 26.
Okay,
And it was the original budget because when the audit's done, it doesn't try and forecast any budget amendments. So that's what is set aside is the 26 appropriated fund balance in the adopted budget.
okay. But am I correct thinking that the unassigned number should go up?
If you go to the next slide.
Okay, all right,
That addresses it.
all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this slide is the story of how we got here and where we're headed. For years, we budgeted to use fund balance and our unassigned reserve fell to about 4.2% in FY '25, which is below where we actually want it to be. But not using fund balance as a revenue source in FY '27, we project unassigned reserves to climb back to about 11%. That is the single most important reason for our budget approach.
So Commissioner Yarborough, that's where the assigned goes away and the delta goes up into the assigned.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any further questions on these slides?
The state's minimum specified is 8%. Is that correct?
No, the state does not make any recommendations on what a fund balance should be. They will look at it if your available fund balance, which is unassigned plus committed plus assigned, you all don't have any committed. They're looking at all of that to be their trigger where it would necessitate a financial performance indicator of concern is if that's less than 12%. So you all will be right on that cusp.
Okay.
They've gone on record as saying it's kind of a myth that they say your fund balance should be 8%.
I knew I'd seen somewhere.
Yeah, because in reality, you can't afford to have an 8% fund balance. Right. Yeah.
Any other questions before we move to the next slide? Balancing strategies. Closing the gap. We began this process with an estimated budget gap of approximately $3.8 million. There was no single solution. Vacancy savings, budget reductions, revenue growth, debt service reductions, and elimination of contingency all contributed to closing the gap. There is no single action that balanced the budget. 4 key initiatives that led to the $3.8 million decrease in budgeted expenditures. 1, budget right sizing. 2, position audit. 3, turnover and vacancy analysis. And 4, deferring capital expenditures. This chart provides the components of how the $3.8 million gap was closed. Vacancy rates and an elimination of positions equaled $1.6 million. Budget accuracy and reductions equaled $827,000. Debt service reductions, $732,000, and new revenue growth equaled $361,000. Contingency removed equals $280,000. So closing the gap, we began this process with an estimated budget gap, like I said, of approximately $3.8 million. So this is how we were able to, these are the components that we use for closing the gap.
Well,
So
look,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. As I understand, it, you have $0 for contingency in the 27 budget.
Correct.
That's a little concerning that we don't have any contingency for any errors or mishaps. I'd like to take a look at that as we go along too.
Okay.
To expand on that, eliminating the contingency as one of our balancing steps. This slide shows that this year we started with a contingency of about 280,000, and as of May we've transferred only about $30,000 of it for small items like autopsy invoicing, animal protection contracts, DMV tags, etc. So through May, we've used very little of it. The reasoning behind eliminating contingency, once we stop using fund balance to pay for our operations, the fund balance itself should become healthy enough to serve as a cushion for emergencies and unexpected costs. So carrying a separate contingency line on top of that may no longer be necessary. Debt services summary. Our debt services drops about $733,000 for next year. Most of that is debt simply reaching maturity, like the detention center, plus debt we had planned for this year that we did not issue. This budget assumes no new vehicle leases, and the ambulance we received this year is paid from fund balance rather than financed. The only genuinely new debt we're anticipating is the UHF radio system and the ambulance remount.
Keith, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I do have a question on the ambulance. Why did we decide not to finance that aside from reducing our budget required for this year?
We decided because I know some of the board members had kind of felt the same way. I put it in the recommended budget is because we already had paid cash for it and we were looking at, financing it to pay ourselves back, but we would save ourselves over, I think, Ms. Sharp, you correct me, $52,000 by not doing that. And since we already incurred the cost, just to, go ahead and say that we paid for it and move on.
Well, that's fine as long as it doesn't impact your cash reserve, correct? Because we've got that money invested in ambulance and didn't finance it. All right?
We had money budgeted, but we never made it to the LGC to take it before the LGC. So money was budgeted for that ambulance But we ended up paying for it because the ambulance got here before we could ever get to the
But
LGC.
we intended to finance it, to put that money back into the bank. the cash
And I mean,
account.
that's still an option if the board decided to go that route. I just know you would save interest that we wouldn't have to pay back. And, the debt service savings would be of $52,000. But that's an option. That's just what I put in the recommended budget.
Okay.
I didn't think we were able to get a loan anyhow.
We paid cash for it. If we pay cash for something,
He's
we
talking
can't.
about is.
No, that was originally what our goal was for 26, but we were never able to get in with the LGC for the approval. So we were not able to move forward with any, to take on any debt service.
And speaking of that, this, the UHF system and the ambulance remount, that's all contingent upon LGC.
Well, it depends on this next slide, the UHF, yes, but the ambulance remount, that could be an option here. If you'll look, there's options for capital purchases from the FY 26 savings. This slide presents options for board consideration and discussion. Staff has identified approximately $944,000 in FY 26 savings that could potentially be used before the end of the fiscal year. These funds could be used for items such as sheriff's office vehicle replacements, health department vehicles, the ambulance remount, maintenance projects, facility improvements, or other one-time needs the board determines are that are priorities. I would caution against using these funds for recurring operations that have to continue to, our ongoing costs. This would really be for one-time uses that we would use out of these savings. And since these are our one-time savings, using them would, be okay for us to do if the board chooses to move in that direction. But since I've already presented my FY 27 recommended budget, I believe this is now a board decision how you would like to proceed. I would encourage that you ask the departments requesting vehicles or other capital needs to explain their operational needs and justifications so the board can make an informed decision regarding how the available funds should be utilized. And tomorrow, I have asked representatives from the Sheriff's Department, the Health Department, EMS, and the Maintenance Department to be present at the work session to answer questions about their requests for capital for the board.
Madam Manager, since you're going to do that, ask him to bring vehicle information on like the health department on these two, mileage, year, what supposedly is wrong with them, stuff like that before we make a decision.
I did send them an email last night telling them that they would need to know the details of the vehicles and that they would need to explain what the purpose and their use is and the for them, referring more so to the health department. And at our department head meeting today, I expressed that again.
And the upfit on the FY 26 vehicle upfit, is that for a total of 15 vehicles? For the sheriff's office top line?
That's what was originally anticipated in the 26 budget when we thought we were going to be doing a lease. But the vehicles themselves have been leased through Enterprise. The upfit costs, the county pays cash for. So this would have been the upfit for approximately 15 vehicles.
Okay, so this would be the upfit for 15, but there's not 15 been budgeted, correct?
Well, we weren't able to move forward with the lease.
Right.
So those dollars are now available. They were funded so they could be used to, rather than upfit vehicles, they could be used to purchase vehicles.
How many would be able to be purchased for that 250,000?
If you look at the bottom chart, each sheriff's vehicle is 58,500. So you could get almost 5. Probably could go with 4 just out of those dollars. Because the Durango cost is 43,000 and the upfit is 15.
Okay, so that would be 5 vehicles plus the upfit for those 5.
Excuse me?
That would be the 5 vehicles plus the upfit for. So you'd be buying the 5 vehicles plus the upfit that would be needed.
The upfit is included in the cost.
Okay, so the upfit is included in the cut, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
You could get 4, not quite 5. You've got a little bit less money, but you've got savings in other areas.
So you can see that we have that you could, if the board chose to do so, up to 10 vehicles. You know, that's an option. You've got $944,000 in savings to be able to work on some of these projects. These just were vehicles that we were trying to put in for the sheriff's department. And I know the health department had requested 2 replacements, and we knew that there was an EMS had an ambulance remount. And, you know, if you did the 10 vehicles and if you chose to go with the health department's 2 vehicles and the EMS remount, that would total the $944,000 in savings. But if you chose that, say, if you didn't want to give this many vehicles to these departments and it was something that we removed from maintenance, you're able to replace it with one of their projects. But the main thing is you've got $944,000 in savings that you could help cover some of these one-time capital costs.
Right. Is contingency part of that option? Put money in contingency, is that an option for that money? Okay.
Contingency.
That's the unspent. Are you referring, could we use some of this money to put in a contingency?
Yes, it's contingency set aside for recurring or one-time needs in our budget normally.
Last year was the first year the county had ever had a contingency. And it was for, I'm not sure exactly why that was anticipated. You can see very little of it has been.
Well, I just see a need for, because, looking at the maintenance budget, it was cut down to, just a very, very small amount. And all he has to have is one emergency or one HVAC system that has to be replaced, and you've got his budget shot. Well, if we had a contingency, that gives us a lot of flexibility to move.
I would suggest once we get to the maintenance, when we look through their line by line, you may already have, I'm not questioning that, but I did look through that today and I just didn't see really significant cuts there. I mean, I know there was reductions, but you correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Sharp, but I know that we did remove some of his capital items.
That's what I'm referring to.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would just like to make one thing about the remount, because that was something I shared with County Manager Williamson yesterday. Remounts, and I see Director Yarbrough's here. I mean, there's a long lead time on those. And right now, planned debt funding, I'm not exactly sure. We've not been in touch with the LGC for some time, and I'm not sure when we would be able to get back on their agenda. So if you choose to stay with debt financing, that's just going to further delay the timing of getting that remount.
Mr. Yarborough shaking his head no. Do you need to add to that?
Right now, I've got a vendor who says he can take the truck today and he can have the truck back to me today. What I've got right now.
So that's still a long lead time. It's not as long as a new one, but you can't have it tomorrow.
The problem is, if I may, Commissioner Holt, is that this remount was supposed to be part of the loan that was taken before the LGC in January, and it didn't get approved. So this truck that we're proposing to remount has, when you factor in idle hours, has over 600,000 miles. It's about 350 actual miles. It's 350,000 actual miles. When you factor in the engine idle hours, 40 miles per hour, it goes up to about over 600,000.
I thought we voted to do that, even regardless of the loan.
Now, that's the actual ambulance that we purchased, that we paid cash for. This is a remount. He had asked for both.
Remember that? I thought it was the remount, the new ambulance, and the UHF.
And we were never able to get through to, the LGC. We never were able to get to a point where they were able to authorize us to be able to move forward with debt services. So we never did get that approval. So it's still, all of those projects are still pending.
I got one more that's bothering me. Back
few slides ago, it said the resource officer was saving money because of the school closure. Did I miss something?
No, it's Oakwood, when they're going to have it closed for the remodel that they're doing, that SRO will not be at that school. So that's why it's one down. But once the remodeling's done for the FY '28, that will restore. Talking about Stony Creek.
I've been talking about it, and I just want to make sure I didn't miss
Right.
it.
Right.
Madam Manager, one last thing before we move any further. This was $944,000. It was left over from last year or this year's budget.
This year.
Okay. I know you got a lot on your plate, so maybe Stephanie could take a side note. When the health department comes, I would also like to know how much they utilize these vehicles on a monthly basis, how much they actually drive them. I mean, if they're making 1 or 2 trips a month, then, we may have to take a step back. Sheriff's Office vehicles, a little bit different story. They put a tremendous amount of miles on them. But with that being said, that's $944,000 that, I'm kind of like, Tony, I don't want to spend it all. Especially as tight as this budget is, I don't want to go out and spend all this, and for some reason, halfway through this budget, we need some money for something. Maybe, has anybody reached out to the sheriff's office to see what they would be able to work with now that we found that we can do something?
But that's what they'll need to come and share with you all tomorrow, because they know their fleet better than anyone else. So that I've advised them that they would need to come before the board and ask what their most critical needs with which vehicles and which ones are high pursuit vehicles, because that would be the ones that I think would be the ones that you would look at replacing first, would be the high pursuit vehicles.
And we're pretty confident on this 944 being a surplus.
I know Ms. Sharp has done the projections, and she's confident that this is our savings.
One question that I have. The asterisk at the bottom says would defer 50,000 of debt service in 27 and 70,000 in 28. And that's referring back to the ambulance remount.
Correct. If you did, and Ms. Sharp, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we went ahead and paid for these items, it would defer where we're not requesting them and, wouldn't have debt service for them in 27 and 28 because we're purchasing them now with cash.
It wouldn't be deferring it, it'd be eliminating it.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the way I read it, it was just moving it forward a year or two.
No, you're right. It would be eliminated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That better word.
Madam County Manager, on the, it says here, savings from FY '26 have been identified to serve as a source of funding for planned and but deferred capital purchase. And that's on this slide about the vehicles. I was just wondering where, is it a specific line item that these funds came from, or?
If you'll look at the
Section.
very top, it'll tell you the source of the funds. We were not able to lease any vehicles. So therefore you have the uplift money for the sheriff's department for the 15 vehicles, which was a saving of $250,000.
Okay.
And then for the salary savings that they had in vacant salaries was $166,000, lap salaries, and public health vacancy savings, the same thing, $84,000. Then unspent contingency money, we had about $200,000. And then the NCACC insurance, we have a savings of $44,000 that from 26. So that's where the $944,000 came from. And it's entirely up to this board as to how many vehicles you choose. This was just something to give you a guide to go by, because I know this is capital items that we are behind on because we've had to defer all of the vehicles that we were supposed to get for 26. And then we're not looking to put any in 27. So this was just to kind of help us get caught up and not get too far behind on this with our vehicle replacement, and the fact that I know that we need the ambulance remount as well. And we are not budgeted for that and, to move this one forward. So we were hoping to be able to, or are we, did we budget for that one in 27?
What?
The remount?
Yeah.
Or okay, so
Yeah.
that would be a savings in FY 27.
And I will just mention, these are not all the savings that are anticipated for FY 26. There are other savings, but these are the ones that I could easily identify now as being unspent.
So I would encourage you to look over this, and when you hear from those departments with some of the larger capital needs, to see what their needs are tomorrow to help you make a more informed decision on how you would like to utilize these funds. This is just being presented to you so you know that there are some options here to cover capital needs. Next slide. Increased accuracy in salary budgets. FY 27, a comprehensive review was conducted of all authorized positions to improve the accuracy of salary and benefit projections, verified all authorized positions and recalculated salaries using current employee data, used actual pay rates for filled positions and approved budgeted rates for vacancies, applied benefits consistently across all departments, including FICA, retirement, and health insurance. Department directors reviewed the vacancies and classifications to ensure staffing information was accurate. As a result, the FY 27 salary budget is based on current verified data and reflects approximately 270.3 authorized FTE positions countywide. So this process provides a more accurate personnel budget and better financial planning for FY 27. Any discussion further on any of the slides that we've went over before we move on?
Mr. Chair,
So,
Mr. Blake.
just want to throw this out there, see how the board feels about it. You know, we're very dependent on our employees. And I was thinking that maybe if we could provide them with 2 personal days in lieu of a pay increase to be utilized during the budget year, at least that's recognizing them.
You're saying give them 2 personal days during the fiscal year?
Yeah, during the budget year,
Right, right.
two personal days to be utilized by the employees.
Okay. Any way y'all can work up a cost on that?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes. And I'm assuming that would just be for full-time employees.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but I think Mr. Clegg is probably talking about full-time employees.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
County manager, I was wondering, like, if an employee is no longer here for some reason throughout the year and those monies, that salary,
Mhm.
what happens to that salary that was budgeted for that employee?
Well, we always are having lapsed salaries, which are vacancy savings for the county. And it depends on how the budget is being set up. And I know for FY 27, we will be using those as a vacancy rate to help balance the budget, because we know that there typically are going to be, you just seen from FY 26, just in the sheriff's department alone, salaries and savings was 166,000, and the health department was 84,000. So for FY 27, that will be used as part of our vacancy rate allowance to help balance the budget.
That are coming up.
Right.
That may
Oh.
provide some additional
Okay.
information.
Expenditures. We decided to do the steps to right-sizing the departmental budget. Right-sizing means aligns expenditures with sustainable revenues. We reviewed 3 years of actual spending history for every department. Departments received target budgets based on actual spending patterns. This process reduced expenditures by approximately $527,000. This pie chart provides a view of the $33 million by expenditure category. Since our mission is service-driven, over 50% of the budget is driven by salaries and fringe benefits. If you look, supplies are less than 6% and maintenance repair is 1.5%. This pie chart represents that we are a service organization. This slide illustrates how the county's personnel costs are distributed within the general fund budget. The total cost for salaries and benefits in the FY27 recommended budget is approximately $17.7 million. As shown in the chart, salary accounts for 67.9% of total personnel costs. Benefits account for approximately 31% of the total personnel package. The largest benefit costs include employee health insurance, 12.7%, local government retirement system, 10.9%, FICA, 5.9%, and then you have smaller benefit costs such as retirement health insurance, sheriff's 401k, and law enforcement separation allowance. General fund salary and benefits by function. This slide shows how the county's $17.7 million in salary and benefits costs are distributed across major governmental functions. As you can see, public safety represents the largest share at 48.2%, reflecting staffing costs for the sheriff's office, detention center, EMS, emergency management, 911 communications, and school resource officers. Human services accounts for 31.4%, which includes departments such as social services, public health, senior services, and family services. General government represents 10.4%, covering administration, finance, human resources, tax, elections, register of deeds, and information technologies. Central services accounts for 4.9%, primarily maintenance and facility-related operations. Cultural and recreation represents 4.1%, including parks and recreation and library services. Environmental protection and economic and physical development makes up less than 1% each. This chart demonstrates that nearly 80% of the county salaries and benefits are concentrated in the public safety and human services, which the county's most labor-intensive service areas. As a result, significant reductions in personnel costs are difficult to achieve without affecting services provided directly to the citizens.
This slide is a breakout of salaries and benefits also by function. Salaries and benefits are down about $2.35 million overall. That came from the position reconciliation and the vacancy analysis results. The largest reductions are in public health and human services, which represent our largest departments. I just quickly want to clarify human services a bit. Most of that reduction is matched by lower state and federal revenue. So the actual savings to the county are smaller than the gross numbers suggested. The one function that increases is central services, up about $121,000, and that's almost entirely to the special separation allowance, which was moved into the general fund rather than eliminated, plus an increase in retiree insurance.
Do we know what, that human services number, do we know what the actual is for the county deal? Since there is state and federal monies attached to it?
I don't have that amount right off the top of my head. I'd have to get that for you.
Okay. And with that being said, when those positions are not, does state and feds keep that money? What they would be allocating if those positions were, so they don't send it at all?
No, we wouldn't get reimbursed for that.
Okay.
This chart shows the details of the recommended vacancy rates used to create budgeted salary savings. This strategy yielded a net savings of $1.3 million after accounting for a corresponding loss of federal and state revenue. We believe the recommended vacancy rate is conservative as it closely mirrors prior actual payroll reversions. FY '26 projected savings is $1.6 million, and the budgeted FY '27 vacancy rate is $1.3 million. Current vacancies is 39, and the FY '27 vacancy rate position is equivalent to 29 positions. Next slide. Process for managing vacancies. Salary budgets are built assuming all authorized positions are filled for the entire year. In reality, employee turnover and recruitment timeline create salary savings throughout the fiscal year. The FY '27 budget includes a vacancy allowance to recognize these anticipated savings while maintaining authorized positions. How we will monitor these vacancies. The finance officer will conduct monthly salary and vacancy analysis. Vacancy reports will be included in the monthly board report, and the county manager will approve all requests to advertise vacant positions and all new hires. So the positions remain authorized by the board and may be filled as operational needs require. However, vacancies will be carefully monitored and managed throughout the year to ensure the county achieves its projected vacancy savings and remains within budget. This is a pie chart that shows how the recommended expenditure budget of $33 million by function. Over 70% of the budget is allocated to public safety, human services, and education, which are mandated services. As you can see from the pie chart, this is a very lean budget.
This pie chart reflects basically the other half of our budget, our non-salary spending, which totals about $15.3 million. The next slides will break this down by function and by category. But the headline is that non-salary spending is down about 1.5 million, driven mostly by capital deferrals and debt services. This slide is non-salary expenditures by function. The big movers here are education and debt services, each down significantly, along with central services. Human resources non-salary is up about $486,000, but this is tied to public health, a public health program that is fully offset by reimbursement revenue. So it does not cost the county. Overall non-salary is down 1.5 million. So how we develop the FY '27 targets. This is the method behind the departmental budgets. We did not just cut across the board. We started with 2 years of actual spending, FY '24, FY '25, then projected where FY '26 was where it was gonna end, where it was gonna fall, or land, and then used a weighted average of that consistent activity to set an operational baseline for each line. Then we layered in known factors like contractual increases, recurring capital, and also took out one-time item costs. That produced a target for each department. Departments could move funds around within their targets, but were advised to really try to not exceed their targets. This approach is what produced the $527,000 in reduction while trying to really maintain and protect services. Non-salary expenditures by category. Here's the same spending, but again, grouped up by category. The dominant story here is capital outlay, which is down about $1.2 million, which is how we deferred costs without really touching or impacting services. A few categories do increase. The largest is in supplies, up about 357,000. And that increase is due to a public health program. It's called the Community Alternative Program. CAP is the acronym. You'll hear that again. And again, this is fully offset by reimbursement revenue, and there is a net zero to the county. This will be, again, seen in additional slides. And then the other increases, contractual, telecommunication, other services are mostly costs being reclassified to correct or more appropriate categories, and not not new spending. Contractual services are up about 132,000, and there are two real drivers in this category. First, we created a new software line to comply with accounting standards, which moved about 94,000 out of other categories into this one line. Second, professional services other is up $87,000, mostly mostly a $60,000 contract in the tax department for the GIS system related services that had been previously misaligned. These are reclassifications and corrections, and again, not new spending. Supplies look like they've jumped up, but almost the entire increase is one line. Supplies and other programs up 530,000 for the public health's CAP program. And again, it's fully offset by the reimbursement revenue. Going the other way, small equipment is down 171,000, mostly due to the IT computer replacement cycle that has been pretty much halted. Detention food is up 59,000, increase in meal costs, and this is also influenced by inmate count as well. Capital outlay is down about $1.2 million, and this is where most of our deferrals reside. So the two largest pieces, building and structure, is down $864,000 because we are proposing to handle the large school projects through lottery funding instead. And motor vehicles is down $240,000. This is where the sheriff vehicle purchases are deferred pending, again, financing/funding decisions. We basically held capital to essential items only.
And I'm going to turn the school slides over to Ms. Sharp because she's definitely more versed in this than we are.
Mr. Chair,
We'll see if there are any other questions.
Was there any questions before?
yeah. County Manager, I just, I was looking at the pie charts and just kind of reflecting on the fact that not too long ago, I requested a departmental flow chart, not from you.
Correct.
And and I was just wondering, human services, what falls under human services?
Well, I know human services, you're going to have DSS, public health. I feel like I'm missing one. I know they're your two larger ones.
But the reason I ask is because it seems like, and I clearly don't know, but that's why I'm asking that the senior center, and I don't want to, because of some of the things we've gone through with that, I don't want the county to lose any money. And so I don't know if the senior center is a department or does it fall under human?
Oh, it's a
Services?
department and they will have a director. Right now, they do not have a director. I'm doing my best to be able to help them along with helping cats and trying to be the manager. And I know that, Kenneth Everett has also tried to assist them as well with any issues that they may have. But I mean, they, typically are able to handle their day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
But we have put measures in place to ensure that something like that does not happen again. And they also have now audit where they can take electronic payments as well at the senior center.
Yeah, and I think if, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have a policy in place now
Correct.
where every department, if they are collecting money, should,
Mr. Horton presented that at one of the commissioners' meetings shortly after that happened.
Yeah, cash handling and depositing policy has been put in place.
okay.
Melissa, I've got the list. If you
And
want me
it's-
to share what's in human services.
Sure. that'd be
Does it
great.
have so is there a budget at the senior center?
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
Okay.
So the departments that are included. Oh, help us, I put this on. The departments that are included in human services is animal control, Caswell County Youth Enrichment Program, community-based alternatives, social services, Roots and Wings, public health, senior services, and that's it.
And thank you. And they each have their own budget,
Yes.
Correct.
correct?
Yes, and for the senior center, the administrative staff handled that since we're kind of functioning as their director.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Manager, before we move further, can you make some notes on your slide presentation right there? Probably not today, but probably maybe tomorrow if we get a chance. I'd like to go back and revisit slide number 12, 21
Wait a minute, can you tell me what slide so I know where you're talking about? You've got questions on,
at the bottom. The number, is it numbered at the bottom?
okay, so on slide 12,
Slide 12. You just want to make a note to, I guess, just put revisit or whatever. Slide 21. 23. And slide 32. Before we get to the school stuff.
any other questions before
I
we
do have
move
one
to the
question,
school?
Melissa. Going back to cap out for buildings, instruction, and so forth, the $895,000 includes schools as well as Caswell County facilities. Is that right?
Is that under your slide?
I'm 41.
Bulk of that is
Okay, do we know how much our budget was last year just for Caswell County?
it would be the 1.5 million less the 895,000, so about 600,000.
Okay, so we're going from 600,000 to $31,000. That's the point I was making with maintenance and buildings and so forth, that there was a significant cut.
Well,
There.
203 of that is the capital outlay for motor vehicles. So if you look up there, so that's the biggest chunk of the county reduction.
Okay.
All right, the schools. Ms.
Okay.
Shaw.
All right. Before we dive into the school's budget, just want to give the commissioners a little information because you'll see how the school system's budget is presented. The state requires them to build a budget around purpose and function. And on this slide, The purpose are the light blue, which is instructional salaries, non-program charges, supporting service programs and ancillary services. And then the functions are underneath that. North Carolina general statutes require the commissioners to provide the schools a current expense, which is what you currently have in your budget. And in the general fund, also I would call it more an operational capital outlay number. And you can appropriate to the schools in a lump sum through the current expense or through any of these purpose and functions categories. You're not able to line item appropriate to the schools unless there's an interlocal agreement. So I just wanted to give you that understanding as we go in and look at the school's request. The county, there are very few counties that allocate by purpose and function, primarily because what that really means is if the school system wants to move money between those categories, they have to come to the Board of Commissioners to request that move. But you can't require them to come before you unless the amount exceeds 25% of that purpose function line item. So for most counties, they just do it as you have traditionally done it, by a lump sum current expense and a lump sum operating capital outlay. But when you see their budget, you'll see it broken down in accordance with the state categories. So if we look at the school's request, this is the revenue side of their general fund budget, not their state monies, just basically local dollars, which are comprised of the county appropriation and showing, for example, how they've included it in their budget. They included the appropriation for the supplement as a separate line item. But the county can only appropriate it through that current expense line. And then they also have funds from fines and forfeitures, interest, and sales and use tax refunds. And in their 26 adopted budget, they propose to use 608,000 of fund balance. So very much like the county has been doing over the last several years, the schools have been relying very heavily on the use of fund balance. So if you look at that total variance column, so the school's 26 adopted budget was 3.8 million. The total for 27 request is 4.4. So that's an increase in their total budget of $550,000. But if you look at what they're requesting from the county, they're requesting almost $1.2 million. So while their total budget's only going up $550,000, they're requesting 1.2 million from the county. And that is basically to fill the fund balance hole, because they don't have any fund balance to appropriate moving forward.
Did they tell you how much fund balance they had?
I'll get to that in just a moment. So that's why when you look at the total, their budget isn't going up as much as they're requesting from the county, but they are looking for county to replace appropriated fund balance as a funding source. So then if you look at their expenditures, here it is broken down by the purpose and function, and that's where you'll see their total budget is only showed, their expenditure side is only increasing the $550,000. And I know the superintendent will be here tomorrow to go over the details of that request on the expenditure side. But Commissioner Rose, to answer your question on slide 45, from their audited financial statements, Their FY 24 fund balance was 1.4 million. During FY 25, they spent down almost 800,000. And so their ending fund balance at the end of FY 25 was $554,000. So their 26 budget assumed an appropriated fund balance that's actually more than they ended up with.
So is that, so do you have the number what their actual fund balance is as of now?
No, I do not.
Okay.
But unless they've curbed spending this year, and stay within their actual fund balance at June 30th, there's the potential for them to operate in a complete deficit. So I would assume, I mean, they would have gotten their actual fund balance number after their budget had been adopted. So I'm assuming they've adjusted accordingly, but that might, I think that might be a good question for the superintendent.
Okay.
But those are kind of the key points that I just wanted to point out to the commissioners. That's important for just a high level understanding before the superintendent goes into the details.
One question I do have is on this page right here where it says county appropriation of teacher supplements. You know, we gave those last year with the understanding, I mean, we had school board members here, we had teachers here, and we basically stated that we didn't know if we'd be able to do this from year to year. So with that being said, how come the amount that they requested, you know, if we're not able to do anything for county employees as far as raises or increases, how come that money that was appropriated for teacher supplements couldn't be taken out?
Well, you could do that, but as I mentioned previously, that line item was not budgeted separately. It was provided to them as current expense. And once you appropriate the funds to the schools, they have 100% discretion on how they spend it. If you take those dollars back, you will be seen as cutting local funding in the state's eyes and in the how they evaluate a county's continuing level of commitment.
Well, how is that considered cutting their funding if that money was not used for operational expenses? If that $240,500 or $221,859 was not used for operational expenses and it went to teacher supplements, how is that considered operations?
Well, I mean, that is part of their operation, funding teachers. But, and I understand that was the intent, and you would have to find out from the schools how much of that money actually went to the teachers.
Yeah.
That's the understanding we
And I
had.
guess my thing is, if that's the case, then we just funded teacher supplements from now to eternity.
Excuse me?
I said, I guess we somewhat funded teacher supplements from now on out if it can't be taken out. I just don't see how it could be considered operational when it's supplements is a bonus, basically. Their raises come from the state.
But you have local funded positions and most counties are funding teacher supplements because the state's not doing their fair share in funding education expenditures.
Correct. But I guess my thing, my big question would be, and, you know, if they felt like we were holding funding from them that they were entitled to, I mean, there's a procedure and a process to go through mediation. to either rectify that or come to a consensus. But I know specifically, and it's probably in the minute somewhere, that we stated that night that this was, we voted to do this, and we told them, we might not be able to do it year to year. This was the year that we were able to do it, and we did.
Well, but you also raised taxes for that purpose, for the supplement purpose. So, I mean, that is currently now built into the tax base. Of course, the board can always change its mind and pull that back, but because the only way the county can appropriate is current expense, while that was your intent, the state sees one current expense number, and that's what they will measure, and that's what the schools will measure. But you are at full discretion to do whatever you want. There may be challenges to that through the dispute resolution process that's established in state statute.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mediation process where the school board and the board of commissioners go into mediation with a neutral person to discuss that. But I specifically remember that the board said that, this was pretty much a one-time thing, and we didn't know if we would be able to do it from year to year.
And that may have been your intent, but your budget says current expense of $3,078,000 in your adopted ordinance.
John, the law this year is the same as the law last year. And we had an agreement with the school board that, we're paying X number of dollars, 2.8 million, then another 240 for the supplements. I guess it was just a mutual agreement, and they paid based on that. Why couldn't we do that again this year?
I mean, but unless you have a formal interlocal agreement between the school board, you appropriate by current expense and they spend it however they want.
Right. That's what I say. Basically, they said they would do that, and they did, to my best of my knowledge, last year. They took that money and paid the teachers. And this year, we can't afford to pay them anymore. I mean, we're cutting with 3.8 deficit, so we can't give them anymore. And they, I think, understand that. And if we give them the same thing, why could we not have the same arrangement this year
In terms of what?
of them paying the supplements to the teachers? If we paid them the same exact dollar that we paid them last year, why couldn't we duplicate that?
You can say that that's your intent,
Right.
but you can't budget that way.
We
Right.
can't specify.
No. Not unless you both sign an interlocal agreement. Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I mean, and just one thing to think about, and I think this is why you look at, once you provide a level of funding to the school system, absent some, economic downturn like happened in 2008, where every county was going and asking the school system, can we please reduce your funding? They're expecting kind of funding to at least stay level or increase. And if you decrease their funding, well, and it's interesting, given that they've relied on fund balance, if you don't fund the 1.2 million they've asked for, they're going to have to cut their budget $600,000 because they no longer have fund balance to rely upon. So even at level funding, the school system is going to have to go back and cut out roughly $600,000 out of their budget.
Go ahead.
So then we're on slide 46. And some of the variances that you've seen in the capital numbers is because the recommended budget does not include a capital amount for the schools at this point, because we needed more information on their capital request, and didn't have all the information we needed as we were putting the recommended budget together. But their total request, and I believe the manager shared this with you, so their capital request was $1.2 million, with 400,000 of that being what's typically in the operating budget every year. That's been kind of, you have a general fund current expense and a general fund capital outlay number, because those are more capital outlay dollars that they use within their operating budget. They did request $845,000 beyond that, which is very similar to the $888,000 that the county funded this year. The manager's recommendation is that first, the commissioners need to evaluate those requests to see if you concur with what they're requesting to spend on capital, because that is your responsibility. Statutorily, you are responsible for funding capital and making the decisions there. But also would recommend using the lottery funds that are there and available to serve as the funding source. Because as you can see, there's over $4 million of lottery funds available. The ADM funds do require a 5% match, unless they are requested to be used for technology purposes. And I believe the schools, when we met with DPI, we had a meeting with Department of Public Instruction and the schools and county staff. And they alluded to the fact that they were interested in using some of those ADM funds for technology. So, and that would be perfectly fine. So then you're really looking at the $823,000 of lottery funds, plus the 2.2 million of repair and renovations funds, that in my initial review of the school's request, the majority of those items could absolutely fit the category of the repair and renovation. So the lottery funds are an appropriate use. Both boards have to agree to use those funds. And absent a long-term plan on how the schools might want to use these funds in the future, I would strongly suggest to use the lottery funds, because at some point the state could pull these lottery funds back. And I'm kind of amazed when I go out and look at all the counties who haven't touch this repair and renovation fund, which is relatively new. And that's being funded with all the dollars, all the new gambling sites have to pay the state. So that's growing at a pretty healthy pace, but I'd probably say there 75% of the counties in the state haven't even touched that yet.
And I did reach out to Superintendent Stokes to let him know when he comes tomorrow to, give an update on the current 888 funds for FY '26, that you all would be interested in that. And also, it would be good for him to prioritize his capital needs for FY '27 in case some of those are not able to be funded.
Jonah, when you said that they would pull those funds back, is there a reason? Is it because of lack of?
No, I'm just always saying, anything that the state is holding on to, there's always a risk that it could get pulled back.
All right, gotcha.
So I'd rather spend those dollars down first.
I got you. You're right.
You know, the state likes to control counties, so. If they got into a crunch and they see there's all these dollars that haven't been spent, that's a great place to go. So that was all that we just wanted to kind of prime the commissioners with. in preparation for the schools coming to present to you tomorrow.
Okay, if nothing else, we'll move on to special appropriations. I went over this during the recommended budget, but just due to limited recurring funding and internal right sizing of the county departments, special appropriations to community organizations were reduced in the total amount of $20,207. And there was a technical correction that will be taken care of for the forestry. The recommended budget should have been $103,818, and that adjustment will be made in the adopted budget. Any more discussion at this point before we move on? Okay. Non-general fund departments. The total countywide budget across all funds is $40.8 million. And detail by fund is shown in the chart. The countywide recommended budget decreased $3.7 million, which is largely attributed to the reduction in the general funds. Next slide. The fire district fund tax rate held constant. This slide reflects the FY27 recommended budget for the county's fire district fund. The recommendation is to maintain the current fire tax district tax rate with no tax rate increase proposed for 27. On the revenue side, the budget reflects projected collections from fire district property taxes, fire service district taxes, vehicle fire taxes, sales tax distributions. Based on current projections, total revenues are estimated at approximately $1.336 million, an increase of about $25,000 over FY26. On the expenditure side, all non-volunteer fire departments received modest funding increases, and these increases are driven primarily by growth in revenues available for distribution rather than a tax increase. It's important to note that the revenue estimates are projections. Actual distributions to fire departments will ultimately be based on the actual revenues received throughout the fiscal year.
Emergency telephone systems. This is our 911 fund. It looks like it's more than doubles, but the increases in 911 equipment costs that simply moved back into the fund from capital plus a software contract. The key point for the board is that this fund is paid entirely from state PSAP funds and has its own fund balance. So it does not use any county fund dollars at all. Family services is down about $49,000, and the honest story here is that we are eliminating one full-time intake position. That position was created when grant funding was available. But that grant funding is no longer available or sustainable. And in that case, the county would be left paying for an unfunded salary. After this change, the department runs on 2 full-time and 1 part-time staff, and the county support is limited to the matches required by the existing grants we currently receive.
Solid waste. The cost increases are related to First Piedmont hauling rates, municipal solid waste disposal fees, C&D disposable fees, and environmental compliance costs. Fee increases are recommended to continue current service levels. Availability fee will increase from $55 to $64. The disposal fee will increase from $75 to $83. These revised fees will generate generate approximately $186,000 of new revenue. The fee increases were considered after a reduction of departmental operating where possible to limit the impact on citizens. Environmental compliance requirements also increased significantly this year. Required monitoring wells, surface water sampling, roadway access, maintenance, and continued groundwater monitoring added approximately $118,080 in additional costs. The budget now also includes indirect costs and a vehicle lease expense that were previously not directly budgeted within the department.
Madam Manager, that, I just want you to look and just see if that $61,000 was eliminated from that indirect cost on solid waste, what would that be able to drop these rates? Can these rates come down?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Sharp, but didn't you say that the indirect cost was added after the fees were set?
Yes. And the solid waste director was able to realign some things in the budget to accommodate the indirect cost charge.
I was just wondering if that 61,000, if that indirect cost was not kept in his budget, couldn't that money be utilized to offset the increase in the solid waste fees for the county, for the citizens?
I mean, I guess you have to ask AJ how much the impact would be.
And I guess the only reason I'm asking that, maybe I'm beating a dead horse, and that's okay. But the solid waste charge the rest of the county for trash pickup from dump sites, or if we go to the landfill, does the solid waste charge the county for dumping the trash out there?
That they do.
I don't think they do. And that's why I'm saying we're charging indirect fees to solid waste and to cats, but yet solid waste doesn't charge the county for the county to dump their trash there, but we're going to charge solid waste. And I'm just thinking if that 61,000 come out, we could offset these fees. Maybe take them down some, because at the end of the day, the solid waste fees are going to go up on the taxpayers.
Well, and just, that is absolutely your pleasure, but if you don't charge the indirect cost charge, then we'll have to have $100,000 of expense that we'll have to go find in the general fund budget because that revenue is eliminated.
Right. So I guess my point is this, is we're finding by these indirect costs, we're just pretty much putting in $100 and some thousand back into the budget off of solid waste and cats, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But in turn, by doing that, the citizens, when they go to pay these tipping fees, are paying more fees. I think I'm correct.
That's certainly one way to look at it.
Right. So it's kind of like we're charging them the indirect cost, and yet the fees are going up for the taxpayer. I just don't agree with that. I think we could because if this thing had been in there if this was been a practice, okay, but it's not been a practice.
Excuse me, Commissioner Rose, it hasn't been budgeted, but it has been recorded. So both those funds through the audits, it has been absorbed in the past.
But last year, I didn't see it in last year's budget when I went back and looked through it, an indirect cost.
That's what I'm saying. It has not been budgeted, but it has been recorded as an expense to both those entities for several years.
From what you're saying is happening on the audit side.
Right. It's happening on the audit side. We were just trying to align the budget with the audit. And there have been sufficient funds in both of those, both solid waste and cats, to absorb the indirect costs. But but if the board doesn't want to do that to cover yourselves for the audit, I think you will need to make a motion that you do not charge indirect cost to solid waste and cats so that the auditors won't expect it to be recorded.
Right. And I'm just one vote. I'm just saying, it seems like to me that we are, for better words, taking money from my left pocket and putting it over into my right. If that was all we were doing, okay. But when the tipping fees go up, I feel like that money, if it was left there, could be utilized to pull the tipping fees down. Now, I understand the tipping fees and some of this others going up a little bit because of these wells. I understand that. But I'm just saying. and I
But
guess
the
my-
tipping fees are charged to people who use it. If, just for an example, if you take that $100,000 out of the general fund budget, that's equivalent to a half a cent tax increase. So if you wanted to fill that hole with taxes, then the whole county would have to pay for those indirect costs.
And I mean, that's one of the slides I want to go back and revisit. But the other question I will ask is, how did we come up with this exact number? 61,000 for,
There's about 150-page report that calculates it.
And that's what we were referring to, that we could go back and look
Yep.
at the fees to see if we could adjust those. Do any counties sometimes, Ms. Sharp, do they look to see if the department has a revenue, enterprise end of the year? Or is that just usually with enterprises that it's just an indirect cost, and if fees have to go up, they go up? Or
Well, it's a cost of doing business because your finance department is recording their revenues, paying their employees, paying all their bills. You're using the county's finance system. The county manager has to oversee those departments. And if they aren't paying building maintenance costs and those things directly, those are being allocated through the indirect costs because those programs have fees, and you're trying to make them fully cost things that if they weren't a county entity, they would have to be paying for those services some other way. So that's the theory. They're business enterprises, but you can't operate a business enterprise unless you have an accounting system and somebody to pay the bills and somebody to collect and post your revenues.
Let's move on to cats.
CC Cats is down about $169,000. The main driver here is capital outlay, down about 182,000 because the FY26 grant funded bus purchases, and this is not going to repeat at this level for FY27. Salaries and benefits are down about 51,000 from reduced part-time driver hours. The important point here is that CATS is a enterprise fund supported by restricted revenue and its own fund balance. So it doesn't draw on the county general fund, and rider service is not affected.
Let me make sure I got my head wrapped around cats and solid waste, where Mr. Rose is talking about the indirect cost. Both the solid waste department and cats are separate funds, correct?
correct,
Anyway,
they're
Cats is
enterprises.
Grant funded.
Yeah. We generate our revenues from grants and from the revenues for our services that we provide.
And when you're talking about the indirect cost, even though they're separate funds, they still use county services, so to speak.
Yes,
And that's how that indirect cost number is coming into play.
yes.
But going by what you're saying, it's always, the auditor has always figured it, I guess, but it hadn't been budgeted. And this year you're showing it in the budget.
I'm trying to align the budget with what the anticipated actuals will be.
Okay.
And to also factor that in in advance so that it doesn't cause an audit finding should that cause that fund to go over budget. And we can provide the details on how all of those, because it's an exact number. I use the number right off the cost allocation plan to put in the budget, and we can provide the details of what's involved in there. And like I said, that is it's very unusual to not have indirect costs charged to the enterprise funds because they do have fees available to cover their costs.
Okay.
But if that's a policy decision that the board wants to make, I think it would just be good for them to go on record so that then the auditors know that there's no expectation to record those dollars.
One more thing I want to clarify, going back to the schools. We cannot specify operational items. You know, it's more or less, we budget X amount of dollars, they spend it as they see fit, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Even, you know, we could have a verbal agreement with them that, you know, we would prefer you to use X dollars for this, but there's nothing binding legally.
No, the most you can bind is through the purpose and function appropriation or a separate interlocal agreement with them that they would have to agree to that would bind them.
Okay. But I know statute says we cannot specify, just like I just said a moment ago. But there is no statute saying that funding level cannot be reduced. And I know that gives the county a black eye. I get that. But if the county got into a position that said, we don't have the dollars to meet where we were at a year ago, there's nothing in statute that says, hey, you still got to pony up that money.
No, but the schools can challenge that.
Okay.
And avail themselves of the dispute resolution process. And there is a specific calculation in the statute of if you aren't able to agree, it forces the county's hand on what you would have to fund them. And in most cases, those formulas do not favor the county.
All right. Okay. Madam Manager, back to you right now.
Okay. Key dates in the budget process, we'll be meeting again tomorrow at 4. And like I said, we'll have the school system and some of those department heads here, and it'll be at 4 o'clock up here at the historical courthouse. We do still have an optional work session for next week on June the 8th, but just know we will have to have a meeting next week if I do not have complete direction from the board on how you want to move with the budget, because until we can prepare the adopted budget, I have to know what your direction is. As far as like with the capital, what you're want, you know, just different things like that. We need to know the direction of the board. And we do still hope to adopt the budget at the June 15th meeting. If not, you'll have to have a special call meeting because the June 15th meeting will be the last meeting that we have in this fiscal year. And just want to say thank you all, commissioners, for, and that this budget does represent a significant shift in how Castle County approaches financial planning. It eliminates the reliance on our fund balance for recurring operations, maintains the current tax rate, protects the core services, and begins rebuilding the county's financial foundation. While its difficult decisions were necessary, I believe this recommendation positions Castle County for greater long-term financial stability. And we do have your detail budget, the recommended budget that we did send out last Thursday. I don't know how far you want to get into this evening. It's your work session. I know we're meeting again tomorrow, but I don't know how long that will take between the school and the department heads.
Let's do it like this. Does anyone have any specific questions on the budget that you received via email. You got a hard copy there in front of you.
I do know that there was a technical error in there, if you notice, for planning. Ms. Sharp and Mr. Horton and myself discussed that yesterday. That will be a technical correction that will be done for the adopted budget, so we are aware of that.
Any questions before we either move on or adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I just like, not today, but just, maybe tomorrow, go back and revisit those slides that, I asked the, manager to kind of make a note of, us looking back at.
And I bring this to fall to you, Mr. Horton. The 2 personal leave days that Commissioner Claggett spoke of, I would like to know a cost on those tomorrow if possible.
Sure.
All right. No questions for today? All right, we will be back here tomorrow at 4 PM. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner Smith. Second from several. Bros, be fine. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Meeting is adjourned.